All right, let's just dive right in. I want to make a claim, a hypothesis I have. 100% of depression stems from the fact that a majority of humanity lives in a work to exist economy. Now, let me be clear. I am talking about sustained depression, not depression itself, because I think that's natural. I just think it lasts a lot longer than it needs to because of economic factors that prolong it. The extended repetitive depression, the generational kind, sometimes we call it a midlife crisis, isn't a mystery as we may first interpret the feeling when it comes. It's not random or a problem that can be fixed internally by examining our own biology, because it's the result of living inside of a grind to exist economy. A system where you pay to live, you pay to struggle, and you pay to survive. Humans have been stuck in some version of this treadmill for thousands of years. So the way I'd like to approach this is by looking at the top 10 reasons attributed to depression, the claims they make, and how all the diagnosis is based on humans living in a vacuum, and therefore it's false. First is the neurotransmitter imbalance, where they say the baseline of serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine are influenced by genetics and brain development, not just the environment. But neurotransmitters are basically stress thermometers. Chronic pressure, scarcity, humiliation, instability, all tank serotonin levels and dopamine levels. And poverty is like a biochemical factory for imbalances in the brain. What looks like biological is often the body just adapting to a constant survival mode or a constant threat mode. That's not an imbalance caused by the brain. That is directly influenced by the environment that we live in, the economy that we live in. Now, the next one is genetics. They say that major depression is 30 to 50% inheritable. I guess this means that genes themselves carry risk independent of the family's current or historical poverty. I mean, sure, genes matter, but genes are just like switches, like a light switch. They aren't scripts. They turn on or off depending on the world a person is born into. A depression gene in a stable and abundant environment might just whisper. You put the same gene in a family with generational poverty, and it screams louder each generation that the family fails to escape from poverty. Poverty isn't a backdrop. It's the work to live economy holding the switch down. All right, the next one is neuroinflammation, or inflammation in the nervous system. Inflammation in the nervous system can be caused by infections, autoimmune disease, metabolic disorders, or gut microbiome imbalances. And they say all biological triggers are unrelated to money. But let's not kid ourselves. Who gets the worst air? Who gets the cheapest food? The most polluted neighborhoods? Who lives next to industrial zones and highways? The people living in poverty? Inflammation is often just a fancy biological label for exposure created by living in an extractive economy. Systematic poverty literally inflames the nervous system. It's like a constant pressure that we just need to normalize. just to be able to live. All right, the next one is early life stress that causes depression. So they say that early life stress can dysregulate the body's central stress response system. But dysregulation can also occur due to prenatal stress, medical conditions, or genetic sensitivity. In other words, the body's central stress response system has an axis. And when that axis breaks, the body goes into a depression. Sure, but what's the most common reason it breaks? The most common reason is unrelenting economic and social insecurity. The kind that hits before birth, during childhood, and then every month for adults that live paycheck to paycheck. The axis isn't fragile. It's just the way we organize our economy is abusive to that central stress response system. Plain and simple. The next one is childhood trauma isn't about money. They say while poverty often contributes to adverse childhood experiences, wait a second, ACE is the acronym for that? Really? It kind of sounds like a psychiatrist aiming at a target. You think they could have picked a better acronym, maybe? Anyway, back to the claim. While poverty often contributes to adverse childhood experiences, they say, trauma can occur independent of financial stress, such as illness, abuse, your parents having a mental illness, or just an accidental injury. Now, no argument there. Trauma has many forms, but adverse childhood experiences skyrocket in houses flooded with stress, instability, and a constant survival pressure. I mean, when the parents are drowning, the kids don't grow, they brace for impact. They're put on the defensive. And this doesn't just affect the people that are going through these experiences. Indirectly, it affects everybody in one way or another. I mean, when you go to the store and you encounter one of these people that is in a depression, you just want to move away from them. Which, when you look around at society right now, and you see everyone kind of dividing, I don't know, it kind of makes me wonder, does depression have some part to do with that? So, the pipeline of generational trauma isn't a mystery. It's just arithmetic. All right, so the next one is hormones. They say puberty, postpartum changes, thyroid disorders, and other conditions can trigger depression, regardless of financial circumstances. Yeah, sure, all those things do exist, but hormones don't just operate in a vacuum. They're deeply tied to nutrition, sleep, stability, safety, and rest. And who gets the least of those? The people crushed by survival economics. And I don't think that constant pressure is something we should just ignore, because people figure out how to cope with it. So biology isn't disproving the argument, it's just describing the damage. All right, the next one is seasonal depression and circadian rhythm that causes depression. They say that depression can be caused by insufficient daylight or disrupted circadian rhythms, which is independent of money. Oh yeah, the constant exhaustion from 2 jobs, night shifts, bad housing, and no sunlight is independent of money. Is independent of money? People don't just develop dysfunction out of nowhere. This work to survive thing that we got going on totally destabilizes daily rhythms more aggressively than even natural disasters affect our daily rhythms. Sure, the natural disaster comes, fucks some shit up, but then back to work, back to doing the same thing we did before. It's like a temporary thing. But this living in this work to live economy is not temporary. It's like a permanent thing. The next is medications and illnesses cause depression. They say that drugs or illnesses can trigger depressive symptoms biologically. Yeah, also true, but who gets the worst healthcare? Who gets the late diagnoses? Who gets the cheaper medications with the worst side effect? Who gets preventable illnesses because of living conditions they can't escape? The people living in poverty? And again, biology isn't countering the argument. It's just describing the symptoms. Biology is more focusing on the breadcrumbs that all lead back to systematic oppression. See, your experiencing self adapts for survival. Yet the inside of us, the part that can't see or hear or smell or touch, records our whole story. Because the part of us on the inside, maybe it's the microbiome or one or the other, or a combination of all the biomes in our body, they sense the outside through the signals that go through your body when you see things, when you smell things, when you touch things, when you experience things. So it knows how to be in defense or attack or neutral or depression when it needs to be, to get you to move, to choose another path. But when the paths are less and less over generations, not having access to different paths, only one path, which is work to live, it kind of constrains our, whatever you want to call it, maybe freedom. All right, so the next one. They say some people just have negative thinking patterns, traits like rumination, perfectionism, or neuroticism, which they say can emerge from temperament or inherited personality, not only the environment. But these are all survival adaptations. When your environment teaches you that one wrong step can ruin you, of course, your body is going to scan for danger. And chronic insecurity builds chronic thought loops, which sets these habits in stone. These traits may be inherited, but poverty is the trigger that turns quirks that would be more useful in a fluent environment. It turns those quirks into disorders. The next one is that depression may be evolutionary. They say that depression may function as an adaptive response to conserve energy, avoid risk, or recalibrate social. But even if depression started as an adaptive signal, slow down, conserve energy, that mechanism wasn't aligned for permanent danger or permanent scarcity in a kind of environment that evolution never planned for. So the alarm never shuts off. Our biology just keeps pressing the button. We can normalize or ignore it, but it always shows back up. Sometimes at the most inconvenient times, but also convenient times too. And although the frequency will be different for everybody, depression always somehow comes back to say hi. Okay, another popular one is personal responsibility. This one always comes up. But here's the truth. You can't willpower your way out of a pay-to-survive environment. I mean, if willpower could fix systematic violence, the world would have been perfect centuries ago. The last one is that culture plays a role in your depression. No, this one is just pure bullshit. Systems, economics, land access, stability, opportunity. Culture is downstream from all of these things. If the conditions trap people in uncertainty, the culture that grows there will reflect that. Fix the conditions and the culture transforms on its own. Alright, so all these biological explanations, chemicals, genes, hormones, inflammation, trauma, they are not independent forces. You know, humans don't live in a vacuum. These are pathways. They are the mechanisms through which a survival-based economy leaves its fingerprints on the body. So, prolonged depression isn't floating in the air like a sort of cosmic bad luck. It's what happens when humans are forced to pay to exist, generation after generation. So depression, prolonged depression, is just a reaction to social conditions that never let people breathe. And even the people that do breathe have to interact with the people that can't breathe. So it affects all of us. And once you see it that way, the whole idea of depression being just a random misfortune, it just falls apart. All right, so I'm just gonna be open about where I find comfort. You know, until I put my body in another economy that isn't built on extraction, well, until I put my body there, I'm essentially a slave, where anything I do, someone else gets a part of that. And I can't escape the system. I've looked. Anywhere you go on Earth, you're going to be subjected to this. I mean, you can go off grid, and still, you have to interact with the economy at some point. But you know, if I were to step out of my body, out of this economy, I mean, sure, I'm a slave, but I'm definitely a rebellious one. And if I could step out of this body, this economy, and choose what kind of slave I would be, it would be the rebellious kind. So I find comfort in that. And when I get to that place of depression, it helps me take that energy and direct it towards pushing against oppression. So the way out of this loop humanity is in right now leads in the opposite direction of division. So resist division. Ignore the noise that divides you. Find common ground with your neighbors. The people who may see the world differently, but their needs are almost identical to yours. Their problems almost identical to yours. So let's find common ground and run this country together. Run this world together. Because I don't know about you, but I'm kind of over this whole feudalism thing. All right, thanks for watching my video. See you tomorrow. Peace.